Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we explore convenient yet effective shortcuts that will help you get ahead and move forward faster by becoming a better leader. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert, and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbaugh.
Need a powerful and entertaining way to ignite your next conference, retreat, or team building session? My keynotes don't include magic, but they do have the power to help your attendees take a leap forward by putting emotional intelligence into their employee engagement, and customer-centric leadership practices. So bring the infotainment creativity of the Fast Leader Show to your next event, and I'll help your attendees get over the hump now. Go to beyondmorale.com/speaking to learn more. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because I have somebody on the show today who, besides being very quick-witted and funny, has some great deep knowledge in regards to something that is so vitally important to a lot of organizations today, and that is digital transformation. Michael Gale was born in Exeter, England, and his father was an academic, so the family moved around as his father gained seniority. Michael has lived in Swansea, Cardiff, Southampton, and moved to the U.S. in 1993. His parents were happily married for 44 years until his father's death 11 years ago. Michael has one sister who is currently a professor at the University of Manchester. His parents were married extremely young and did nothing but love their children, stretch them, and rejoice in their journeys. Michael feels incredibly lucky. His sister is a certified genius, and though Michael struggled, his parents never treated their children differently. From a very early age, Michael's family would have deep debates at supper at 6 p.m. every night. Michael's mother is a brilliant ceramicist, and his sister is an extensively published world expert on women in theater. Michael immigrated to the U.S. in 1993 and was privileged to be part of an incredible company led by Peter Zandan, one of Austin's founding 1990s entrepreneurs. Michael then went to a company called Micron to lead their Web 1.0 revolution. From there, he went off on his own to build two companies, which were sold to Monitor Group and Forrester. Michael's last company was sold to a $1 billion consulting firm. He is currently partner at Digital Inc., which coaches and trains organizations to thrive in their digital transformations, and he's the co-author of The Digital Helix, which shows what drives performance for digitally transforming organizations, as well as key components and mindset skills needed to lead this digital-first world. Michael lives in Seattle with his life partner and best friend, Laura. They've been married 22 years and have 3 dogs they adore. Michael Gale, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
Absolutely.
I'm glad you're here. Now, I've given my Legion a little bit about you, but can you tell us what your current passion is so that we can get to know you even better?
It's still digital transformation. It's a 1.7 trillion initiative. It's the size of the Italian economy, size of the 10th biggest economy in the world, and it is going to touch everything we do as consumers, citizens, and as businesses for the foreseeable future. It allows us to whiteboard what's possible and really see no limitations other than the size of the whiteboard you're writing on. So I think if you can't be enthused by that, I think life itself probably isn't very interesting.
Well, that's an interesting point. Okay, so when you start talking about that magnitude from an economic perspective, are we really talking about touching every single vertical in industry, both public and private sector?
Yeah, I think every moment of our lives is going to be radically touched by. I'll give you sort of a slightly bizarre 24/7 example. Imagine, it's midnight, you're in bed. It's very likely you're going to be tracking your heart rate, potentially even your sleep patterns, and sending that to a company that will then either electronically adjust your bed or will load those theoretically into medical files that are used to then handle sleep issues or type 2 diabetes issue. At the same time, and many of us have Nest devices in our house, they'll be tracking where your heat's being delivered, where it's leaking, and how much it's costing you, and even potentially going onto the grid and finding a lower economic cost for that electricity at 12 o'clock at night. Well, emails will be passing around, and that marketing program you set it at 4 o'clock in the evening will be fully tested and be delivering results by 9 o'clock in the morning. That could be affecting your supply chain, could be affecting your media and marketing partners, could be affecting even what you say at your opening address to your team at 9 in the morning. And more importantly, the way you interact with a government when you move town maybe that day to get a new driving license could all be done online. So I think absolutely everything we touch, feel, experience, don't even understand that's there is going to be digitally transformed. If not, it's currently being transformed in near real time.
Well, and in addition, in the book, you had talked about a digital transformation perspective, and you had mentioned something about in the next 12 months, leaders estimate that they will spend on average 19.9 hours per person per week in digital transformation issues. But then over the next 3 years, you say that number is going to climb to 22 hours per person.
That's 2 bits day a week. I mean, that's literally, you take Monday and Friday or Tuesday, Wednesday, or whatever it is, you're going to spend that much time thinking about this issue. And that's not just us saying this. These are executives we actually interviewed for the research. I mean, thousands of them we talked to and said, look, walk me through what you're spending your time on and how you categorize it. And I think this is the most transformative process, because for the first time ever, we've built technology in this field of dreams concept. If you build it, they will come. Well, now we've reverse engineered it. You've got to dream what you want, and the technology can give you access to those possibilities. And that's not a very difficult pitch for a company to make to a CEO or a VP or a department manager, but they have to actually teach them how to do it. And that's where the failure rate occurs. That's why so many companies get this wrong.
Okay, so when you start talking, I mean, from me and listening to you, I start thinking of so many things that are associated with this whole digital transformation. Of course, all the culture components. I start thinking about the issues with creative thinking and the problems that we have with creative thinking. And creative thinking is a foundational component necessary for innovation to happen. I start thinking about how organizations typically go about their business and, often squash the creative thinker. I mean, so when I start thinking, you name in here 7 challenges to doing digital right. And I swear to goodness, I probably added 5 more just right there.
That's okay. I don't think. What we know from the research, when we talk to sort of 30 digital transformation masters in commercial and government, when we do the primary research, a huge engine of it with the Economist Intelligence Unit originally, is that creativity generally should overcome any problem. And I think that's true in life, politics, everything. I think the challenge really is there's lots of other things that organizations squash before they can even squash creativity. I think one of the issues is overpromising. I think that chasm can be a terrible disaster. I think, secondly, that there is an intent to try and buy an answer when you need to really fertilize and breed your own system for doing it. So creativity is a good place to go to if you can solve those major 7 challenges. If you can't solve those 7 challenges, you can have the best creative thinking in the world, but it will never get out of the whiteboard. It'll never get out of the plan. It will never get out of the PowerPoint. And, we found that really only 16% of organizations were really getting this sort of digital DNA right. And the other 84% that don't not want to do it. They just don't know how to do it correctly. They don't put the elements, the genetic components in place that give them a high chance of success.
Okay, so needless to say, the genetic components is where you start getting into the helix, helix aspect of it. But in the book, you don't even introduce the helix until like chapter 7. So I mean, you're already halfway or more through the book before you start revealing it, because there's all this ground and foundational work that you're talking about. And one of the things when you start talking about this, the 7 challenges component, that initially when I looked at it, I was like, I had lost my breath for a second. But then I got what you were coming from, and that was part of it. Like in number 7 of your challenges, you say that digital is not just customer focused. So I think it's important to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I'll give you a fantastic example. If you look at customer service in an organization, there are thousands, millions, maybe hundreds of millions of interactions organizations have with customers. What went right? What went wrong? What they could do better, how the reaction. Well, the real value of that information is not actually just in the customer element, but how your employees function, how they interact, how they can sense and feel changes, how it affects economics of the organization, how it affects supply chain, how it affects employee skills management, is that if you really look at it closely, digital has always been on the edge. It's always been customer focused. We all did Web 1.0 websites. But the intrinsic value of digital is how it makes the systems work internally better to be responsive to employees, to partners, stockholders, and customers. It shouldn't just be limited to just customer interaction on a website. The power of that information to change different, to make different decisions is remarkable. Zappos is a great example of it in terms of the shoe industry, but GE should be doing a much better job of the way they're doing it now with employees and partners than they do. So just looking at the edge, customers, ignores the truth of the core and where it could be valuable.
When I start thinking about the enormity of this issue and the rapid pace and the economic requirement, the competitive requirement, so many different elements, a talent requirement. I mean, top talent don't want to work for the 84%. They want to work for the 16, right?
You are so true. And I think particularly in the current job market where we're, lower on that Phillips curve unemployment mark than maybe the last 3 decades, I think we've seen a shift where employees want to start to become, or workers want to become their own CEO, manage their own careers. That pressure of the light side and the dark side are more transparent than ever before. Organizations look at Indeed, they look at Glassdoor, they look at, maybe the Forbes or Fortune list of top companies, and that's an increasing variable in selection of organization. Will I go there and become a better version of myself because there is going to be another job? I want to be able to leave somewhere having accumulated skills, equity from the organization, and knowledge I can use to advance my own career, my own income level. So I think it is very concerning if you're not being part of that 16%. It will continue to drag yourself down with millennials, which in a few years' time will be, 50% plus of the workforce.
Well, that's a very short timeline, and even going past that, say 10 years beyond, they become like 90% of the workforce. It's like a huge drop off.
Yeah, and frankly, if you can't succeed and digitally transform within 2, 3, 5 years, you may not be around in 10 years. I mean, we asked these CEOs 2, 3 years ago, basically what they thought the biggest threats to them were. And 55% said, we are more concerned about startups in our segment as really critical threats than ever before. Tiny little fireflies are making elephants jump up and down. So if they don't solve those challenges in the next 2, 3, 4 years, they may not be employing anybody in 5 to 10 years' time.
Well, that's a good point. And typically speaking, when you start talking about, large organizations that have been around for a long time, that whole transformation process takes significantly longer than it would otherwise. You have just, so much legacy, baggage and weight, that prevents you from doing the pivots that are necessary. So if I'm in that position, what are one or two things that an organization can do in order to start a spark?
Yeah, I think there's 2, actually. One is, yes, we didn't get to the digital helix to chapter 7 because I think people try and digitally wrap themselves and assume that's transformative. Having a website or even having an ability to communicate with customers online, that's not digitally transforming yourself. So the first thing is be aware of what your challenges and drivers are. Invest at least an hour. Read the first 80 pages of the book. It might surprise you. I think the second issue is really think big. Don't think small. Don't think incremental. Don't think wrapping. Genuinely think how you can radically disrupt your own norms, your own traditions, because tradition is just the illusion of permanence. That's not a truth. It's just a reality of the world. There's a great piece in an English newspaper today that talked about the volume of purchasing that they predict will be done with cash, currency, by 2026. They argue that less than 1 in 4 transactions, 1 in 5 rather, will be done in cash. And in fact, theoretically, by 2036, maybe less than 1% of transactions are done in cash. So in a history of 2,500 years of cash, we're arguing in less than 1.5% of that time, the idea of cash could disappear. So I think you should not limit your imagination to history. You should genuinely think very big about what you could disrupt internally that has a natural upside to it of great magnitude. Don't think small, think big, but take small steps in how to get there.
I think that's a great point. I mean, so many of the things that we project are taking much longer, in fact, are not. And like what you just referred to, I mean, for a time I worked for Deluxe Financial Services, and a lot of people here in the States know them as the check printing company, Deluxe Checks. And, they were talking about their projections, how paper payments, via check were going to go away within a period of time. And I was like, no, that's going to take a generational shift. I mean, it's not going to happen that fast. Well, I'll be darned if it didn't. I mean, the shift was just so rapid. It was amazing. So, okay. So I've got to create, and bolster up, my DNA. And so talking about the helix, if you could step us through the digital helix real quick, I think that'd be great.
Yeah. So it's really based on primary research, huge amount of it, about 1,000 case studies we worked through, and really 30, 35 interviews that probably took about 300 hours to do. We just follow people. And when we looked at the research, when we looked at their interviews, we found sort of 7 common interconnected components. And the 16% that got it right so far empirically, and the 30 plus people we interviewed that pretty much got it right, these 7 components dominate everywhere. So component number 1, executives in these organizations were digital explorers. They didn't just support digital initiatives. They physically rolled their sleeves up and became active sort of advocates for the change process, not just strategically, but on a day-to-day basis. They said, hey, I'm going to own project A, B, and C, and I'm going to make it happen. So they roll their sleeves up. They only mandate after they've done, and they live these principles in however they interact, how they measure, how they work. Really big deal. If you look at people like Larry Scott, Pac-12, or even executives in some government departments, they don't just believe in this. They really live it. They live it daily, and they function that way. The second component, remember, all these are 3-dimensionally connected like a helix, was this idea of information being about listening in new ways. So traditionally, we have these sort of predefined ways. We listen socially, we interact socially. What we found with information is it's almost like having a set of bridges floating across a range of rivers. Some information becomes really valuable, and then it loses its value. Some streams of information, places you could get it, become valuable, and then lose that value, then come back again. So you're looking at this constant ebb and flow of information. So these organizations don't just create a dashboard and live by it for the next 2 years. They may create and change dashboards every few weeks. USAA was a great example, the insurance company in San Antonio, of this more fluid view about what relevant information you need and what streams or sources you get it from. It's why those companies are very good at paying attention to trends and reacting fast enough. The third thing that was completely common was that all these organizations either saw their citizens or customers as having sort of experiential portfolios. It's not just one moment that matters. So, for example, imagine you're buying a holiday with your partner and you go online and see some beautiful pictures of a beach in Greece. Well, you just want to check those out. So you then go onto Facebook and type in the name of that beach and you see an awful picture of a hotel that's half built. You're picking up experiences from a range of environments because that's the way customers can do things now. And you've got to respect, as a brand, those experiential portfolios are really vital. It's not just the stuff you can control. It's stuff way outside your control because you can really find it for the first time ever. The third thing we found is that all the most successful organizations planned marketing and communications as one flow. They sat in the room and they plotted all the actions and words in one plan, not a marketing plan and a comms plan. It was the marketing and communications plan. So it was a constant connected process around one idea, one message, one set of words, one set of actions. And these are really empirically common. So by the time we actually measured about 170 variables, these types of activities were economically most connected with success to anything else. And the last 3 are pretty straightforward. We don't believe in sales journeys anymore because nobody goes on a journey. It's so fast. How could you measure it? It's like a sprint. So we see things as connected moments, not as journeys. So all this journey mapping, we don't believe is valuable anymore because it tries to simplify too complicated a process. Pick the moments where your brand can win, tiny moments they may be, and lock in on it. The last 2 were much more esoteric to some, but were easily explained. Firstly, everybody is responsible to each other. So if you have information I need, or I have information you need, or somebody else has insights we both need, everybody has to share this stuff. This fundamentally more collaborative culture, rugby teams, scrums, getting together quickly. was really driving success in places. The silos got broken down very quickly. And finally, and I come from a strategy background, so this probably hurt my soul more than anything else, is that strategy is about being in the moment and one step ahead. Never go past the horizon, because you don't know what the horizon looks like. Your strategy should be, how do we be successful and be nimble? And it's that combination of agility and success, this constant preparedness to break down where we've been historically, that is part of how these organizations are really successful. And these 7 common components were present in all these organizations that were in the 16. There were 32% of organizations that had some of these, but because they didn't have all of them, they couldn't get economic return.
Well, I mean, gosh, there's so many things as you were going through that I started thinking about. And I know that for a lot of folks who've actually, been on the show and who I'm actually engaged with, I mean, the whole journey mapping thing and the statement that you had said, I know will actually drop some people to the floor. Because,
yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things that is just so hot and common, and so many people are doing it and chasing it and, want to do it. But you're saying, whoa, kind of like the whole strategy thing. You're already a little bit too late.
Yeah, well, we owned a number of trademarks on journey mapping 10, 14 years ago when we built the methodology. So I'm having to admit the ship we were part of building is no longer relevant. You can't fit a journey map into a world of moments. And customers are moment orientated. You've got to connect moments together. There is no linear pathway. It's not like you put a little ball in a tube and it drops to the bottom. It's more like a Pachinko machine where there are thousands of balls running around. You've got to decide which ones you pick up on. And it infers a level of control that brands no longer have in the communication or selling process. Customers are in complete control of what they want, when they want, and how they want it. You have to work out at which phase of those pieces you can maybe intersect yourself.
Okay, so another thing that I was thinking about as you said that is that if I'm talking about all these moments coming together, then I start thinking that it's going to be more important for organizations to understand, their analytics, the insight, the data, capturing the data and being able to do the interpretation so that they can spot those particular moments.
Well, yeah, so you can collect as much as you want. And I think whereas before we were in a shortage phase of data, so capturing was critical, the act of filtering, interpreting, and actually inducing action now becomes really much more critical for analysts than ever before. And you've got to have a framework. You've got to be flexible in the way you think about it. And you've got to recognize the world you're trying to service is very different than the world you used to service. So yes, capture is important, but probably frameworking and then socializing are probably 2 of the more important skills that generally data analysts struggle with.
Well, exactly. I mean, even when I've seen people who've been in charge of, data analytics groups and BI groups, that is not their forte. It is to, collect data and report on data, not to do the, the insight and interpretation and therefore, the nuance and the finesse aspects of data.
Oh, I think that's where the big consulting firms head. The reality is that most data can be now reported automatically and frankly self-serve better. I mean, that's why we go to Amazon, because we can self-serve off an infrastructure, anything we want, whenever we want it, how we want it. Yeah, if I'm a data analyst right now and I've spent my whole life training skills for accumulation, I've really got to spend my life training myself on 3 skills, which is interpretation, frameworking, and actually socializing those changes to my colleagues. Because if I can't do that, it will be very difficult for me to have a successful career 2, 3, 5, maybe 10 years from now. Machines will do the analysis far better than humans will.
Okay, so for me, I also, trying to interpret and read through and can make connections and draw conclusions to what you're saying is that for the longest time, I have been saying how from if you're going to do your journey mapping and that's something that you need to do, you need to overlay, the empathy components and do some empathy mapping and understand your customer at a much deeper human level because of all the things that you're talking about, that they're having moments, that they're having, different, interactions than you used to in the past. And humans are not textbook. I mean, yet once I put it in ink, guess what? They've changed, right? So I have to constantly go through an editing and iteration process. And journey maps just aren't meant, they're meant to be a little bit more static as well as looking in the past. It's more of a nostalgic component. It's a moment
and I don't think that's helpful. And I think the reality was when we lived in a synthesized world of mostly binary and some digital, and then maybe some digital and some binary, you could get away with it. But I think journey mapping was like putting a steamship engine into a sailing boat. At some point, the basic architecture of the vehicle isn't robust enough to carry the load you want it to carry. And moments are the best thing to do. Emotional moments, technical moments, acquisition, aspirational moments. You really should map those moments and think of this like a Pachinko machine. How many balls can you capture roughly together at roughly the right time? Because that's a logical aspiration versus this desperate need to control things with a journey when that control is no longer even possibly in your hands.
That's a great point. And another one I would like to add to that is the whole the fear abatement, moments, the fear reduction and avoidance moments, because it's like I was having this discussion with somebody the other day where they kept talking about the aspirational side of dealing with customers. And I'm like, okay, we all have been on a swing. And so if you think about a swing, in order for us to have momentum, we have to have the back, the back part of the swing. And what do we do in the back? We kick in order to move forward. And so you have to think about when you're dealing with customers is that their motivations come like a swing. And it's the times when they kick where we have opportunity.
Perfectly put. Absolutely correct energy statement.
Okay, so man, gosh, with all this, and I had mentioned before when I first got the book and I started reading through it, I mean, I just got excited and got a lot of energy reading about this empirical evidence, because I also love empirical evidence, and how you've actually basically built this framework for people to actually execute this digital transformation, but it's loaded with emotion. And one of the things that we look for on the show are quotes to help us focus and point ourselves in the right direction and maybe get rid of some of that fear component. Is there a quote or two that you like that you can share?
Yes, I think we were very careful to think about quotes at the beginning of each chapter. And I think there are two in particular to me. One is tradition is the illusion of permanence, which is absolutely the best compass you should always use, because fundamentally, I think the world changes so radically that it's impossible to assume it's the same. I think the second one that I really like is Albert Einstein's quote that we use in chapter 6, small steps equal giant leaps. And the quote's basically this: the world as we have created it is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking. And that to me illustrates the perceptual or mindset barrier that prevents many well-intentioned organizations from really transforming themselves, and they end up just transitioning to a partly digital framework. This world is so different. You have to change the way you think about it, whether or not it's journeys or moments, whether or not it's thinking about to actually illustrate the skills and attitudes you want to have, not mandating it. This is about a new way of thinking. And the organizations we spoke with, USAA, Hallmark, very traditional US company organizations, recognize this need to transplant mandate with thinking and action that was fundamentally different by nature. And that is a tough thing to deal with because we're ground down every day by the need to just do a little bit better. This is about being radically different, taking, giant leaps through these small steps.
Well, and I appreciate the work that you're doing with this, and look forward to your next edition as you continue this study work and see if you can help that next 16%, get to their transformation faster.
Well, I hope so, because actually without it, I think the US economy and others will really be open to threat from startups everywhere. And at the end of the day, big companies employ a lot of people globally, and some of those jobs are going to, I think, be automated out or AI'd out in a way that may not necessarily be the logical way to do it.
That's very true. So when you look at all of the things that you have going down, and I can imagine, because of the book and all the work that you've done before and the need for of all of this, that you have a lot of things that are sitting in front of you as far as goals are concerned, but you can't do everything. So if you had one goal, what would it be?
I think one goal to me was, if you look at that Fortune 100 or 500, is that if in 5 years' time, every single CEO there said, we are as digitally transformed as we genuinely can be at this point. We've made mistakes, we've had failures, but we feel that we are 500% better equipped to handle the future. I believe that would be really successful if we could help a number of those organizations get to that level. Because it is as much about the psychology of preparedness for a future yet to be defined as it is about the process for how to get to that point.
And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. The number one thing that contributes to customer loyalty is emotions. So move onward and upward faster by gaining significantly deeper insight and understanding of your customer journey and personas with emotional intelligence. With your empathy mapping workshop, you'll learn how to evoke and influence the right customer emotions that generate improved customer loyalty and reduce your cost to operate. Get over your emotional hump now by going to empathymapping.com to learn more. All right, here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Michael, the Hump Day Hoedown is the part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Michael, Gale, are you ready to hoedown?
Yes. Now I'm nervous, but go ahead.
What do you think is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
Inability to let go.
What is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
Make people the best versions of themselves and organizations will thrive.
What is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
I tend to work harder and faster and deeper than most people.
What do you feel is one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life?
Innate sense of curiosity.
And what would be one book that you'd recommend to our listeners? And it could be from any genre, and because, of course, we're going to put a link to the digital helix on your show notes page as well.
I actually would read Pete Carroll's book, Win Forever, because it really does talk about what it takes to make cultures work. And it was written nearly 10 years ago.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Michael Gale. Okay, Michael, this is my last Hump Day Hoedown question. Imagine you were given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25, and you have been given the opportunity to take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you. But you can't take everything back. You can only choose one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
Be infinitely more aggressive and accept that really good things will happen, because I think the world is much bigger now than I realized it was then, and I should have been more infinitely optimistic then as I am now.
Michael, it was an honor to spend time with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
Yeah, drop me an email or Chris at michael@inc.digital, and we'll be able to give out some digital copies of the book for free. More than happy to do that to help people. Connect with us on LinkedIn. And other than that, this was incredible fun today. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael Gale, for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. And the Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.